Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Molloy, and I'm here this morning to welcome you to the presentation on our report, The State of the Discovery Nation 2019, which publishes today. This report's been put together by ourselves in close collaboration with the Bioindustry Association and also the Office of Life Sciences. And I'd like to acknowledge the work of James Peach in putting this report together and thank him as well as the BIA and OLS. The State of the Discovery Nation is the second of the Medicines Discovery Catapult's reports. The first one, 2018, identified the major needs of UK biotech for R&D and collaborations and access to parts of the UK infrastructure which UK biotech finds difficult and challenging, but ultimately which will drive productivity. This report goes into greater detail in two areas, AI in drug discovery and also the adoption of complex and advanced preclinical cellular models, and covers again the current demographic of the UK's drug discovery sector. The Medicines Discovery Catapult is now entering its second full year of operation and is part of a national Catapult network that's supported by Innovate UK and UKRI. And it has a vision to improve the productivity of UK medicines discovery by putting the patient at the heart of discovery. And I'll demonstrate how we do that in a range of ways as we go through this presentation. Currently, the Medicines Discovery Catapult is 80 FTEs, based mostly here at our headquarters at Alderley Park, but with a team across the nation that comprises experts from industry, from technology, and from academia, supported by a solid foundation of regional engagement, product delivery, and operations. This group then is designed to meet the needs of UK biotech identified through our industry engagement, initially in 5 ways. On the left-hand side of this slide, you can see the two main R&D groups in discovery, science and technology and in informatics. And then on the right-hand side are activities in providing access to parts of the UK infrastructure which UK SMEs find challenging to access, but ultimately have told us will drive their productivity. And those are access to curated and consented patient samples and data, access to the UK's wisdom and CRO expertise across the UK through virtual R&D, and enabling what we term drug discovery syndicates, which are a novel approach to developing medicines, combining the input of medical research charities, SMEs, and other key opinion leaders in new consortia to drive drug discovery in a lower risk, higher productivity manner. These, as I say, were all identified in our 2018 report and have been implemented, and I'm pleased to say have been readily and rapidly engaged by the community. And we're currently running over 60 projects within the Medicines Discovery Catapult with members of the community, with a very strong pipeline of activity upstream of that. So to the report, this year's State of the Discovery Nation covers 3 main areas. One is a demographic and an overview of today's current SME environment, and then 2 deeper dives. One into the application and adoption of AI in drug discovery, and then that application and adoption of more complex preclinical cellular models. This report has been put together through a wide range of C-level surveys across the SME sector, enabled very strongly with our collaboration with Bioindustry Association, but also face-to-face interviews with the SME community, both in the core sector that we will talk about, which are those biotechs with drug discovery assets, and that's an Office of Life Sciences definition, and also, very importantly, with the service and supplies sectors, which are a vital part of our national community. Moving to the key insights of this report in 3 main sections. We note very strongly that 80% of the SMEs in our community are service and supply companies, a vital beating heart of our community and accounting for 90% of the employment within it. We also recognise that 60% of SMEs in our community have fewer than 5 staff, and 80% have fewer than 20 staff. Now, this really does educate us in terms of how we can help these companies, how we can provide collaborations between and with them to enable them to gang up on what is some of the bigger problems in medicine's discovery, accessing technologies, new products and services, and new ways of working, which will enable each and every one to become more productive and more predictive. In the drug asset space, 70% of UK SME drug assets are across cancer, the anti-infectives, antibacterials and antivirals, and CNS disease. And we also note from our sector review that artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, and so on, and cell and gene therapies are viewed by the community as hot areas of interest. And these are areas that are attracting not just academic interest, industrial interest, but also investment. We undertook to every year go out to the community and ask how we're doing and what should we do more of. And I'm pleased to say a majority of the market does understand our offer, both in the R&D heavy sectors, but also in these access platforms. UK SMEs are continuing to call for government support around access to funding and also access to tax incentives. And unsurprisingly to many of you listening to this, 80% of those companies have significant concerns about the impact of Brexit on current and future recruitment. Moving through then into the deep dives, we note that 90% of the companies in our space say that they need or want advanced AI or machine learning to improve their business. But we recognize at the same time that 75% of those companies spend money on data access and data curation. So there's a very large implication when applying AI to make sure that your data is accessible and right. In the area of complex cell models, the community notes and encourages progress in this area to reduce animal usage and to become more predictive and more productive. But it's also saying at the same time that these models require validation, they require industrialization, and they will benefit from an improved understanding by regulators of what these models do in order to drive their adoption. Starting then with the SME market overview, our SME sector remains strong. But at its heart are a set of core companies who have drug assets, surrounded, supported, and enabled by a really vibrant CRO community and advisory community that is helping SMEs nationally and internationally progress their drug candidates through preclinical and into the clinic. And we must celebrate and support that sector, which offers the UK not just pioneering expertise, but also opportunities for international trade. UK SMEs working on over 900 drug candidates internationally remain a world-leading cluster. And in fact, in the oncology space, a recognized global cluster of expertise. We must remember that 25% of the top 100 selling medicines ever were discovered here in the UK. And that capability, that ambition, and that drive is maintained through our SME community. But the demographic of assets within that community is also changing. And now we see that non-small molecules represent over half of the national portfolio. And I'll come on to some data in a minute. Cell and gene therapies are an area of intense interest and investment. But importantly, I make no apologies for underscoring this, the collaboration between SMEs and SMEs with service companies is of paramount importance. It is vital that UK SMEs, who are large in number but small in individual staff size, use the SME CRO community and CMO communities well in order to move at the fastest and most predictable pace. Across the UK, there are about 1,500 SMEs involved in UK medicines discovery in some way or another. Of this, about 20% cover the OLS definition of core companies. Those are companies whose direct focus is on owning and progressing drug assets. 80% of our community is in service and supply across a wide range of advisory, outsourcing, and materials supply areas, all providing support both nationally and internationally to the drug discovery community. The BIA have generated a vision for 2025, which indicates very clearly that the UK should be able, with its strong science base and commitment to this particular sector, to have at least 50 more biotech companies at an early clinical stage than we do. This combination of core, advisory, outsource, and other companies really do give us the opportunity to pull our academic science through into industrialized, high quality, high value medicines and companies. And it is the combination that will win what is very strong international competition. When looking at individual staff numbers, we have in this sector over 21,000 people employed in this discovery sector. But it's very clear from this graphic that a vast majority of those people are employed in the advisory and the materials supply and outsource and service sectors. And we need to recognize that there's a disproportionate number of people employed in those support and service industries. Those people, many of whom will have come from large pharma companies and other companies with expertise in this space, provide more than just world-class capability. They're providing advice, they're providing guidance, they're providing program and project management, and filling in the understandable gaps in expertise and capability and technology that companies in the core sector with relatively small staff numbers will all face. We see then that core and advisory companies' productivity is delivered through progressing their projects really quickly. But the service companies grow productivity through growth in people and growth in their services. And therefore, in terms of the support for the sector, it's vital that we provide the service companies with access to world-class new service capabilities, technologies, and ways of working that they can serve the sector with better. And that is one of the clear goals of the Medicines Discovery Catapult. If we look overall at the numbers of people employed, core versus service and supply, you can see here that 60% of companies in core and service and supply have got between 1 and 4 people in them. And a very, very small number of companies have over the 95 or 100 people. So we have a community here, a majority of which are small companies working in collaboration, filling in the necessary gaps that they have in their capability and understanding by working together. The UK is a really collaborative environment across private and public sectors, and that's something to both celebrate and support. I mentioned earlier on the impact of cell and gene therapies. Our sister Catapult, one of the other catapults in the national network, the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, has done an impressive job in helping support and nurture this community in cell and gene therapies. And so you can see in the right-hand graph there, the size of that cell and gene therapy grouping within the overall core sector. The Medicines Discovery Catapult is supporting companies working in other modalities to cell and gene therapy. But I want to both recognize, celebrate, and support the activities of the Cell and Gene Therapy Catapult, who have helped grow and develop a sector that is continuing to gain significant momentum nationally and internationally. So when we look at the overall spread of companies, we then move to what are those core companies developing? what sorts of assets is the nation progressing? Some of this analysis was done in the 2018 State of the Discovery Nation, and we take this one step on in this report. There is no doubt that the UK's cancer cluster is recognised as being world-class, and one of the reasons for that is it's supported by a very cohesive research community and has enormous charity input. We see some really strong clusters forming around CI UK and other cancer charities that enable this community to come together around the patient. And the Medicines Discovery Catapult's drug discovery syndicate concept is actually aimed at amplifying that in a range of different disease areas. We see in the area of CNS a very heterogeneous set of therapeutics being developed for a range of conditions, but obviously a clear cluster around dementia, with focus both in academic science, charity-based supported research, translational research, and specific funding. And that specific funding is obviously critical to the direction of fuel into the system for developing CNS-targeted diseases in a high risk, but high value and high unmet need area of work. The area of anti-infectives continues to be one of market challenge, particularly in the area of antibacterials. And all of you listening to this broadcast will know about the challenges at the market level, some of which are being actively addressed both at governmental levels, at national charity levels, and international levels, on the basis of providing a market pull to enable early discoveries to move into development and beyond. It is absolutely vital for the nation and internationally that we target anti-infectives for the ongoing build-up of resistance that we see both in antivirals and antibacterials worldwide. Finally, in the area of respiratory and musculoskeletal, whilst the UK does have a presence in that sector, you'll see many of the companies are actually in the clinical sector and few preclinically. Looking then at our core biopharma sector again, with around about 900 assets in R&D worldwide, we see 70% of those assets in cancer, anti-infectives, both antivirals and antibacterials, and in CNS, with smaller amounts, as you can see, in the immunology and GI sectors. If we look at those companies then, rather than assets, by therapeutic area, you will see almost 50% of the national cohort of SMEs is in the oncology space, 25% in anti-infectives, 14% in CNS, with a smaller amount in respiratory and musculoskeletal, making up the major groups across the nation. On the right-hand side of this graphic, you will then see the split of clinical versus preclinical activity for those companies. And you can see a good balance in oncology and to an extent in anti-infectives, representing quite a lot of antiviral work in the clinic. But you see that you're increasing imbalances in the CNS, respiratory, and musculoskeletal spaces. Now, I've already mentioned the lack of commercial pull in anti-infectives, particularly for antibacterials, which provides a challenge. But we also note that there is a risk in losing a critical mass of translational expertise in respiratory and musculoskeletal if our community is moving inexorably into the clinic and not providing the new seed corn of preclinical assets being pulled through. Now, some of that effect may be investment related, it may be a lack of a cohesive environment, but we are aware of very strong moves being made by British Heart Foundation and others to move some of these their assets forward in the cardiovascular space. We would like to see more in respiratory and musculoskeletal to feed that pipeline for future medicines discovery, but also for the health of the UK's community. So that deals with the demographic of the assets in the nation and the companies in the nation that we are aiming to support. We undertook to ask the community what they thought of us on an annual basis and publish that. And in that regard, we're very pleased to say that the SME community is aware of our offer and is increasingly likely, identified through net promoter scores, to recommend us to others in the community. To reduce that to some numbers, about 55% are aware of our offering and interested in working with us. And we recognize that about 30% of the community are interested and want to know more. So our engagement teams, which we grew significantly in January of this year, have an active task to go out and talk more and with great detail about the activities that we can undertake with the UK community and the access that we can help them provide. Respondents to our surveys asked us for collaboration building. This reflects the relatively small numbers of staff in individual companies and the requirement to collaborate and gang up on the problem. And also to provide them with the ability to industrialize some emerging science, emerging technology so that we can drive its adoption. It's really important to consider the difference between innovation and adoption, two separate parts of a supply chain, both of which are vital. We must prove new technologies in order for them to be adopted, and when they are adopted, only then do we increase productivity within the nation. We also saw that 75% of the respondents asked for government support in the form of direct funding rather than in-kind or infrastructure support, although those two things are still vitally important and the MDC is helping companies engage and access that infrastructure. The fuel of finance is still the most important characteristic for many CEOs in order to help them realize their plans, their ambitions, and the value in their pipeline. When we look then across what the sector is asking us to do as an individual Catapult, collaboration wins out first. Can we help broker introductions and coalitions and hold those coalitions together across technology, across SMEs, academics, and charity to help bring that necessary multidisciplinary group together to drive more productivity in medicines discovery? Those collaborations come in a wide range of science, technology access to assets such as curated patient samples and patient data, and also pre-market technologies. As we move through this spectrum then, new engagement models, such as the use of the virtual R&D platform to help SMEs access advisory, CRO, CMO, manufacturing and supply capability to help them drive their projects in a new way. Drug discovery syndicates are new engagement models, and those also are gaining good traction, very pleased to say. Access to funding is around our ability to work with the SME community to access grants, industry-led grants, where we can help provide some of the key R&D and collaboration capability that the industry partner wants and that the grant funder wishes to enable. And we have an expert group here which is helping multiple SMEs have access to many sources of national and international funding. And you'll see as you come down to the far right-hand side, access to science, this reflects our ability to access pre-market technologies and early stage and emerging technologies with a great science base here at the Catapult that lets industry utilize these new emerging technologies, prove their principle, put them onto the critical path, but also in doing that, get the data that enables them to move their projects forward. So there's something in it for everybody. Many of the SME community provide a supply chain into some of the bigger companies nationally and internationally. So it's important for us to understand what the big company requirements are so that we can help and that SMEs can understand what does the supply chain look like, what products should they be generating, what technologies should they be using, what services could they be developing and then promoting to these companies. And so I've included here a big pharma view, which comes to us from the industry, asking for some very specific SME deliverables that will help them in the future and ultimately provide value for those SMEs. So you can see here that there's a clear recognition that the last decade in cancer has been transformational after many decades of making modest progress in improving lifespan through new cancer therapies. We've taken some really massive jumps, and there's been a sea change in both the types of therapeutics and the way in which they work, driven by a better understanding of the basic science. And a request here from pharma, can we do this in other therapeutic areas? And if yes, will we make that level of progress? And what the sector's asking for is a supply chain of insight, of innovation, and also predictability coming from the SME and the services communities to help them fail faster or fail less than they are currently in most of the projects that are starting up today. The data from AstraZeneca and from others is that there is a residual 80% failure rate in concept to market for most therapeutics. Now, one recognizes that medicines discovery is a high-risk endeavor and failure is intrinsic to it. However, if we can move that 80% failure rate to 70%, that would be a massive sea change, a huge drive in productivity. And AI systems and the use of earlier stage, more predictive models are viewed as being vital components of that future. So let's look at those two things in isolation. AI in drug discovery is recognized as a core technology. We see in large pharma companies and in smaller biotechs, the budgets are growing and the interest is growing and potentially the hype is growing too. Larger companies appear to be moving expertise in AI in-house, and we recognize in that two things. One, a draw on talent, and secondly, potentially AI systems coming in behind the walls of the big companies and not available to the smaller companies who really can also benefit from them. The wider industry is looking for ways in which to manage this new cycle of AI. It is looking for benchmarks and comparisons between AI systems. It's looking to match up what the real industry need is with what vendors can supply. Vendors, on the other hand, are looking to what the real industry need is and how their systems can be applied to those. So one can see that in order to help drive the adoption of this new and exciting area, we must get those systems well tried and tested and industrialized, and that takes acquisition and use of data. We must also work hard on generating the next generation of applied AI experts that the whole sector, both large and small, can use. Where is AI used then? The concept and the wish, the desire of the community for the use of AI is across the board. But you can see that 90% of companies believed it was important, and a majority, if you can regard these differences as significantly different, which I would challenge, the trends are to use AI at an earlier stage in target identification and lead generation optimization to progress that early stage, high attrition set of projects further into preclinical, faster and with greater level of predictability. That's where the current emphasis is, and I think everybody in the sector is convinced that that will change with time, but right now, that's where the bulk of interest is. On the right-hand side, you'll see the types of AI data that are used, the types of analysis and insight that those AI systems are providing. First of all, in data acquisition and integration, the types of data science needed there to provide the seed corn for the algorithms to use and be tested against is critical. If that is not right, then algorithms will be trained on poor data, and the only thing that can come out of that are poor outcomes and insights. Secondly, data science is being used in information extraction from this mass of data, getting larger every day. Image data, semi-curated data, sparse data, and in some cases unstructured data. it's really important to identify a clear high-value seam of data that can be used, extracted, applied, and insights derived from. So these skills, those first two skills, the acquisition, integration, and the identification of these data seams, are vital, without which the AI systems of the future will neither be trained nor adoptable. As you move then onto those last two bars, data filtering and curation, and then data mining, these are increasingly the applications of these many and varied AI systems, some of which are trained on a very tight data set, some of which on a more robust and broad data set. And each of these will have specific in-business uses. So you can see some foundation approaches and also some very business-led, problem hypothesis-driven requirements in AI. But the lack of availability of these well-curated and large-scale data are barriers, major barriers. And announcements have been made in recent weeks about access to new image-based data sets, but there are a wide range of data sets that are necessary to both validate targets, to promote those targets with the greatest chance of being effective, looking at drug combinations and so on, that at the moment are absent for most SMEs. So how can we support the adoption of AI in drug discovery? Fundamentally, make data available and make those data useful, make those seams of data high value, and enable AI systems to be tried, tested, and compared using those data. Secondly, and very importantly, training a new cohort of applied data scientists, those that understand not just the concepts of AI, but the data that's being used in drug discovery and across drug discovery with those AI systems. Really important that there is a new generation of applied talent to meet the needs of large and small companies and the vendor community. And then you can see that the linking of those companies together, the vendors with the users, is critical, because vendors need to understand what the real business case is. And users, whether large or small, need to understand what vendor solutions can really perform, what undertakings they can really manage. And it's possible that many of those things can be done in combination, multiple different AI platforms addressing a single or complex issue. And the Medicines Discovery Catapult has been working with a wide range of companies, and we've announced recent collaborations with Optibrium and Chief AI in the area of making data available and providing test data for new and high-value AI systems. But also in doing that, there's an immense training effort, and you'll see over the months to come increasing focus on those two areas. We do believe that despite the fact that there are a bewildering array of opportunities for AI and increasing competition and increasing number of companies with both very specialized or broad offerings, the UK can and will thrive in this particular area. And the MDC aims to help those vendors and those users of AI develop those new products and services, and most importantly, adopt them. Second area of deep dive is an area of complex cellular models. Complex cellular models are aimed at improving the predictability and understanding of how drug candidate modalities, be they large molecule, small molecule, or others, will perform in a real disease setting. Now, for many years, we have used relatively reductionist models of disease in order to progress potential drug candidates. There's a recognition within the industry that to get more predictive and therefore more productive, we must model better. This will enable us to do a range of things. It will reduce potentially the use of animals in research, where we can predict what a multi-tissue, multi-organ system will do in response to a molecule. But also we can refine our understanding of human target-directed therapeutics in a human or patient-derived cellular model at a relatively early stage that will enable us either to select particular classes or to be able to predict for certain outcomes, be they adverse events or particular modes of metabolism, which will give us early stage guidance on directions of development for particular types of molecule. So all of these things are important, and they sound good, and they are good. But there are some clear market barriers to making this adoption happen. First of all is, what does better look like? And we'll come on to that in a minute. But also the implications of regulation and pricing that will drive adoption. And these should not be underestimated. It's really important that regulators looking at sets of data understand what complex cell model data are telling them. But also it's important for both the developers of technology and the suppliers of services that the pricing is right to drive that adoption, but at the same time recognizing the value that they bring. Our work, therefore, is to help both of those, both the users and providers of those services, to validate their models and support pre-sales, and very much like AI, to bring that community together. The interest of the community in complex cell models is all the way across the R&D process, from target validation all the way through to preclinical. And so you see in biomarkers, in efficacy, in toxicity, and even in functional pathway analysis, complex cell models can play a role. However, I talked about what does good look like, well, or better look like for each individual disease area, or ADME area, or even tox area. It's really important that the industry believes in the model that it's due to adopt. And that takes validation. It takes the use of compounds of known activity. Can that model predict it? It takes activity also from the developers of the technology to make that reproducible and robust. Otherwise, this will not be adopted. When one's making change in an industry, as these models no doubt are and will, it's vitally important to make that change as straightforward as possible. To work, therefore, with the vendor community, with the academic community, and the wider industry community, including the contract research organizations who ultimately will be the providers of many of these services to the industry, to make sure that we understand what robust looks like, what validated looks like, and what reproducible looks like. And the MDC is working hard with its experts in cell culture, cell biology, organ on a chip, and elsewhere, to ensure that we have both the cell culture and cell biology robust, but also the improved means of measurement that may be through advances in mass spectrometry, imaging, and other omics. Because these complex cell models will produce more and more data of a higher quality and context than previous models. And we must be able both to generate that data and through informatics be able to analyze it and understand it. The interest across the community, again, you'll see is to a large extent in oncology, but you can see here the increase in interest in CNS disease, reflecting the relatively skewed preclinical nature of our community, but also that understanding that we must be better at modeling our patient biology in the lab, in a preclinical environment, before we take some very big steps towards and into first in patient and first in human. So you can see oncology and CNS being our leaders there, but complex cell models also have been asked for in safety, toxicology, and immunology, what we're terming here sort of other disease or non-disease specific modalities. So we will choose a focus, or some focus areas in here that meet the needs of the community and also reflect the output of the academic community. And the MDC is already working with the NC3Rs to pull some of these models through from a high-class, world-leading academic endeavor into industrializable and validated and robust products, which can then be used by the industry in a service and supply mode, in addition to an academic mode. How can the UK support the adoption of complex models then? Well, there's a large call for funding to come into this sector. SME company funding that will enable startups to work with ourselves and others to validate and make robust and make reproducible their models, which could turn their company into a core asset owner, but also into a member of the service and supply community, leveraging their basic understanding of a therapeutic area or cross-cutting area like safety on tox or a particular organ type, to help the community get more predictive and productive. Academic funding, and I just talked about the NC3Rs initiative, which was announced by the MDC a few weeks ago. That drives more money into the translation of these emerging academic technologies into an industrialized environment that helps to drive adoption. And similarly to AI, you can see access to resources, training, and so on, that's been asked for by the community, such that it can adopt these new ways of working, and for CRO companies and the service sector to be able to supply these out to the community, both nationally and, importantly, internationally. So similarly to the AI systems, community recommendations for MDC are to help translate from an academic environment into industry, to help vendors and users understand one another, to meet the real industry needs with products and services supplied by those SMEs and larger services supply companies into the industry. That is our goal. And the goal of the informaticians and the informatics scientists here, our cell biologists, our bioanalytics specialists, and the whole Catapult is around helping these groups of people come together around a significant problem, which is how to become more predictive and more productive through complex cell models and using AI. So as I finish off then, and thank you for your time in listening to the highlights of this report. Our community is thriving with a really strong, world-class, vibrant service and supply sector that the MDC and the national community is looking to for new products and services, new ways of working, support for this wider community, so we can have more clinical stage companies in this nation. Currently, our national focus is around cancer and anti-infectives, and we are seeing a preclinical community in CNS asking for new ways of working to help them drive their preclinical assets into the clinic. The UK understands what the Medicines Discovery Catapult is here for, but we are restless in our wish to engage the community all across the nation. We will continue to do so routinely, rigorously, and relentlessly. In the two areas then of AI and complex cell models, these are emerging technologies that the industry is calling for. It's calling for help in validation. It's calling for help in meeting their needs with vendor capabilities. And the MDC is here to listen first and then act on the basis of that listening. On the basis of your listening, I thank you again very much indeed for your attention.